So as you heard, yes, I do work as a doctor and I work in the operating theaters. And yes, it's true. Us doctors, when we operate, we listen to music. We go to YouTube and we type in a song that we want, and then we start operating. But because we're operating, YouTube will go to ads and we can't skip the ads. So suddenly we're stuck in this endless loop of ads going, no, how do I get out of this? Or we type in the playlist we want, Justin Timberlake, but then YouTube would use its algorithm to take us to a different playlist like Justin Bieber. And then suddenly we're going, no, how do we get out of this endless loop? And that's how 2021 has felt. We've been stuck into this loop where we've gone, no, how do I get out of this loop? Because 2021 began with bushfires, just like we had last year. Then we had floods, just like last year, but they were worse. And then we had COVID, just like last year, but it was worse. And so we're going, no, how do we get out of this loop? But it was all of life was on this repeat because we had an Australian cricket captain resign like we've had before. We had a climate change conference like we had before. And the Australian Wallabies lost to the All Blacks like they always do before. And so now we're going, no, how do we break out of this loop? How do we find the bigger, better new start that we're looking for? So welcome to Christmas 2021. And our question this year for this Christmas is this: how can Christmas give us the bigger, better new start? So my name is Sam Chan. Thanks again for having me. I am from Third Space, and I'll be trying to answer this question now in the form of a 15-20 minute talk, followed by some question and answer from you guys. So how can Christmas give us the bigger, better new start that we're looking for? Well, here I suggest at least three things. Number one, Christmas can give us a bigger, better new start because we don't have to climb the ladder anymore. Because the Christmas story is this: Jesus, the Son of God, the CEO of the universe, comes down to us and meets us where we are. Now, here's a photo of where I caught up with another guy called Sam, a friend of mine, a few years ago. And this photo is not photoshopped. My friend Sam really is that tall, and I really am this short. I think I've worked it out that I am in the shortest 1% of the population. And so when I work as a doctor in the operating rooms, I have to stand on a stool just to see the patient. It's so humiliating. I can't move the operating room light. Someone else has to move it for me. It's so humiliating. I have 3 young boys. I've told them that chances are when they grow up, they will be just like me, not very good looking and not very tall. They will be very short. And that means no girl is ever going to like them. Their only chance in life is to study hard and make a lot of money. Now, of course, it's a joke, but it's only a bit of a joke because we know that in real life, really, we have to be big, strong, and mean. They're the winners, the biggest, the strongest, the fastest, the meanest. And that's why we talk about success as being like a tall person. It's about jumping hurdles. It's about climbing mountains. It's about climbing the ladder of success. But Jesus in the Christmas story flips it all around, because in the Jesus story, Jesus, the Son of God, the CEO of the universe, comes down the ladder to meet us where we are. But it's more than that, because we read in the Christmas story, Jesus wasn't just born as a baby. He was born in a manger, like being born in a dumpster. He was defenseless and he was homeless, because we also read that for the first few years of his life, he was like an asylum seeker, a refugee fleeing his country, fleeing a genocide. Jesus comes down his ladder and meets us where we are, which is fascinating, isn't it? Because in most religions, it's the other way around. We are somehow supposed to climb the ladder to God. We climb the ladder to heaven. We have to make ourselves good enough for God. But in the Jesus story, Jesus comes down the ladder and he makes himself good enough for us. And even if we're not religious, even if we don't believe in God, or if we don't believe in the Christmas story, we do the same when we read self-help books, because self-help books are all about how we can be better than who we are. But they all ask us to climb the ladder through our own sheer hard work, through determination, through discipline. We are meant to lift ourselves by our bootstraps and make us better than who we are. But Jesus comes down the ladder and says it's not about determination. It's not about hard work. It's not about discipline. It's actually about grace. It's a free gift. And if God can be kinder to us, we too can be kinder to ourselves. The second way that Christmas can give us the bigger, better new start that we're looking for is this. We don't have to look for validation anymore. Why? Because Jesus doesn't just come to us as a baby. Jesus comes to us as us. He becomes our species of life on this planet. He takes on our atoms and molecules. He becomes us. And in doing so, he validates us. Now, as you heard earlier, I work as a doctor part-time. I work in the operating theatre, and I work as a surgical assistant. And you're wondering, what is a surgical assistant? Well, I'm the guy who holds your leg while the doctor operates on your leg. Just like a mechanic might need an assistant to hold up the bonnet of the car while they change your oil, a surgeon needs me, an assistant, to hold the leg while they operate on your leg. A trained blind monkey can do what I do. So the nurses in an operation will look at the surgeon and they think, oh yeah, I can see how that takes 6 years of med school. That takes skill. Then they look at the anaesthetist who's keeping you alive and they think, yeah, I can see how that takes 6 years of med school. That takes a lot of skill. Then they look at me holding your leg and they think, how does that take 6 years of med school? There is no skill involved. I'm at the bottom of the hierarchy in the medical world. You know, in medicine, we have that saying, not just a GP, because, buddy, you are just a GP. Well, I'm the guy who couldn't even become the GP. I'm lower than the GP in the hierarchy chain. You know, earlier this year, we had the vaccine rollout and the healthcare workers got to jump the queue. The healthcare workers got all their vaccines before everyone else did because they were essential frontline workers. And they all got emails from the health department to say it was their turn to jump the queue and they could get their vaccines ahead of everyone else. So I was watching all these doctors and nurses getting their vaccines, their shots, and I'm thinking, where's my email? Like, where is my email? How come I'm not getting an email yet? I was the last to get the vaccine out of all the healthcare workers because I was the least essential out of the essential healthcare workers. I was right down the bottom. It was very hard to find validation in my job. It was very hard to find value, worth, and dignity as the leg holder. And that's life. We look for validation. We look for value, worth, and dignity in what we do and what we own. And so we find validation by having the trophy job. We find validation by having the trophy family. We find validation by having the trophy holiday. But the Christmas story flips it all around, where we don't find validation in what we do or what we own, but simply by who we are. Why? Because Jesus comes down the ladder and he becomes one of us. He takes on our atoms and molecules. He takes on our nose, our nostril hair, our acne, our BO. He becomes one of us and validates us. He says we have infinite value, worth, and dignity simply by being who we are, because Jesus, the Son of God, became one of us. And that means whether we're a leg holder or a surgeon, whether we're a cleaner or a CEO, whether we're an Uber rider or an airline pilot, we don't just have equal dignity, we have infinite dignity. Why? Because Jesus became one of us. And the third reason why Christmas gives us the bigger, better new start that we're looking for is this. We can have life in its fullest because of the Christmas story. Because in the Christmas story, Jesus isn't just born as a baby. The Christmas story is full of miracles. The birth itself is a miracle because we have the miracle of the virgin birth. Jesus is born of a virgin, the Virgin Mary. But it doesn't stop there, because when Jesus grows up, his famous miracle is he turns water into wine. His other famous miracle is he feeds 5,000 people from just a few loaves of bread. And the greatest miracle that Jesus does is this: he dies on a cross for us, and then he rises from the dead back to life. And then Jesus offers that same miracle to us. He says we too can have the miracle of a new birth, a new life. Now, if you stalk me on social media, you know that I love to barbecue, and I love doing the slow charcoal barbecue, the low and slow charcoal cooking. And it's quite nervous. Like for 12 hours, you're cooking. There are no cooks, two cooks the same. Anything can go wrong. So I have to monitor my charcoal cooker for the whole 12 hours. But the good thing is that it gives me an excuse not to be with wife and kids for 12 hours. So it's a 12-hour escape for me. And there's a miracle to charcoal cooking, because you begin with these dead, lifeless lumps of charcoal, of coal, and then you give it a spark of fire. And bit by bit, the charcoals come to life. They glow, they're warm, they're alive. And the Christmas story is this: we can come to Jesus with who we are, dull, lifeless. It's like our life itself is a lifeless bit of charcoal. And through the same spark that gives the miracle of the Christmas story, the death and resurrection of Jesus, this same spark now comes alive in us. And we have the miracle of a new birth, where we have the warmth, the glow, the life of Jesus. Now, at this stage, if you're like me, you're going, whoa, 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 time out, time out, time out. I'm sorry, but I am a person of the sciences. I have evidence-based belief. You are asking me to believe in the Christmas story, Jesus born of a virgin, turning water into wine, feeding 5,000 people from some loaves of bread, and he himself dying and rising from the dead. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, I can suspend disbelief for many things, but this I cannot suspend disbelief for. And I hear you, I understand you. I too am a person of the sciences, evidence-based belief. I'm a doctor. But think about it this way: we all believe in miracles already. Whether we believe in a God of the universe or no God in the universe, we all believe in miracles, because we believe that this universe came from nothing. We believe that life came from non-life. And we believe in personhood, that there are conscious minds that have a personality, that are capable of intelligent, rational thought. Yet this all came from unintelligent, irrational, chaotic matter. So we're left to believe either there is no God and this all somehow happened, or there's a loving, powerful God behind the universe, and that's why and how this all happened. And as a person who believes in evidence-based belief, this seems to be the more likely explanation. And if there is a loving, powerful God behind the universe, then it's easy to believe in something like a virgin birth, because, you know, life came from non-life once upon a time anyway. It's easy to believe that water can turn into wine, or someone can feed 5,000 people from loaves of bread, because we had the universe come from nothing already. And it's easy to believe that Jesus would want to die on a cross because we have a loving God. And it's easy to believe that Jesus can rise from the dead because we have a powerful God. And this same loving, powerful God wants to give me this miracle of new life as well, life to its fullest. Well, what do I mean by this new life? Well, it really is, like the Bible explains, that the difference between death and life. It's that big a difference, because it's a difference between once living a self-absorbed, empty, unfulfilled life, and now living a full, fulfilled life where I'm part of a bigger story, where I'm part of Jesus' story, where I'm part of Team Jesus, belonging to Jesus and bringing his love, mercy, and justice onto this planet. It's like switching from this life where I live for myself only, where I worship myself, to now one where I can live for and worship Jesus, the Son of God, the CEO of the universe. It's a difference between having a life full of guilt, shame, secrets, and regret, to a new life where I'm clean, I'm washed, and I can start all over again. And that's how the Christmas story can give me a new life, life in all its fullest. So do you remember our original question today? It was this: how can Christmas give us the bigger and better new start? And I said there are at least 3 ways it can happen. Number one, because we know Jesus came down the ladder, it means we don't have to climb the ladder anymore. Heaven comes down to us. Secondly, because Jesus became one of us, means I can find infinite value, worth, and dignity just in who I am. And the third way Jesus in the Christmas story gives us a new start is this: we can now have life in all its fullest through the miracle of Christmas, the miracle of new life, of new birth. Now, a few years ago, I bought myself a Jeep. A Jeep is a perfect second car. I wouldn't want it as a first car, but it's a great midlife crisis car. It's loud, it's noisy, it's bumpy, it's rugged. But the problem with a Jeep is this: it has horrible fuel economy. It gets something like 6 Ks per litre. It uses something like 16 litres of petrol every 100 kilometers. And for the first few months when I was driving it, I couldn't believe it. So I used to keep a logbook to see if I could improve the mileage. Or maybe if I just took a different road, maybe if I drove a bit slower. But every week the logbook showed the same thing. My mileage was horrible. It wasn't changing. But every week I took the logbook just in case maybe things would get better, but it never did. Until I finally realized, you know what? Things will never get better as long as you keep driving a Jeep. The only way it can get better is if you change the engine or change the car. And it's the same with us. Every year we think, okay, maybe this year things will get better. This year for sure. Somehow my job will be better. My relationships will be better. My life will be better. But nothing's going to change until something changes, until we break the cycle. And that's what Christmas does. It's God's way of breaking the cycle, giving us an engine transplant, a heart transplant, a new car, a new life, where Jesus becomes one of us. He comes down to us, so we don't have to climb the ladder up to him. We find infinite value, worth, and dignity just in who we are, so we don't have to look elsewhere for validation. But most importantly, the miracle of Christmas, the miracle of the Christmas story is available for us, where we too can find a new life, a new birth, and a new start. Well, thanks again for having me. I'm going to hand this back to our MC, Clement, and I look forward to question and answer time from you guys.
I believe we've got a first question that's popped up on the chat box, and Samuel's asked, how can we get the new life that you mentioned?
Like I said, it's all about grace. It's a gift. So it's as simply as saying, you know what, I can accept it just where I am, who I am. And it's about trusting, like, is this gift available? And the Bible talks about calling out to Jesus. So it's as simple as a prayer where, you know, Jesus, I'm going to go out on a limb. Hey, you've made this offer of new life. I'm just going to trust you at your word. Show yourself to me. I accept this life just the way I am. And then after that, of course, it's like the miracle of a new birth. You think, okay, now what to do? How do I take my first steps? And that's where it's really helpful to talk to whoever brought us here today, and they can give us a bit more information of what those next steps might look like.
So if one was to be friends with Jesus, I suppose, is there any self-help books you can recommend to us?
You know, I do read heaps and heaps of self-help books. I find almost all of them, you know, do have elements of help in them. And so I find them all useful. But having said that, the one that I've just read most recently is by David Brooks. He's a New York Times columnist, New York Times writer. And David Brooks only 2 years ago put out a book called The Second Mountain. The Second Mountain. And it's all very similar to what we've talked about today, where he says in life there are two mountains. The first mountain is the mountain we climb, where we climb the corporate ladder, where we look for success, trophies, validation, and awards. We get to the top of that mountain and suddenly we realize it's empty. There's actually nothing here. It's unfulfilling. It's quite self-destructive. And David Brooks himself discovered that when he climbed that mountain, became a New York Times columnist, wrote some bestsellers, hit the top of the mountain, but his whole life fell apart. It unraveled. His marriage fell apart. And he suddenly realized, I'm empty, I'm unfulfilled. And he said, that's when you realize there's a second mountain. And in this second mountain, you realize, whereas in the first mountain, we were trying to meet the needs of the ego, we were serving our own ego. On the second mountain, it's about serving the needs of the spirit, of the soul, where we give, where we love, where we serve. It's about people, not success. It's about relationships and serving and giving rather than trophies and awards. And in this journey, David Brooks himself became a Christian believer, because when he began the book, he wasn't a Christian believer, but by the end of the book, he becomes a Christian believer because he thought, okay, if life is all about grace, if life is all about love and relationships, if life is all about giving, this only works if it's in the rhythm and the fabric and the DNA of the universe, that it's all about loving, giving, and grace. This only then works if there's a loving God behind the universe, who himself is a God of grace, a God who comes down the ladder rather than God who asks us to climb the ladder. And that's when we realize it must be the Christian God who's become this universe. And when he discovered grace, he discovered also God, and he became a Christian believer by the end of writing that book. But it begins as a self-help book, David Brooks, The Second Mountain.